Good morning and welcome to Cooks and Cars. Hi, I'm Rob D'Amico alongside Adam Merlin. Happy New Year to everybody at 2021, which is really cool to see. I know a lot of people have been waiting for that. Not that a lot's changed really, but
2020 was a great year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sure nobody was sad to see that go.
Great stuff. But did you have a safe and happy New Year?
Very quiet. I played a little Roblox with my son.
Yeah,
and my wife
big.
and daughter watched a Disney movie.
Okay.
And my whole house was asleep by about 9:15 or so.
Oh, man, you went to bed early.
Yeah.
You celebrated the Australian version.
Well, the funny thing is everybody's like, yeah, COVID, it's hard to do anything. I mean, I think last year we did pretty similar activities. So.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't do much anyways for New Year's. It's safer that way. You stay home. You don't get caught in the amateur drinkers out there and you get behind a wheel and do something stupid.
Right.
Man, that's it.
Go to a restaurant, pay 10 times the normal prices and wait in line to get it. I mean, it's just, I'm not trying to be, negative. I mean, it's a fun holiday and all, but yeah, I mean, we have 3 small kids at home. So
Adam's 80 years old, by the way. So that's
right. Yeah,
explains a lot.
I have. I'm 41 going on 80. So, but I have some cool cars.
Yeah, you do have some cool cars. There's no doubt about that.
Redeeming factor. And I have a big green egg.
That's right. You're one of the cool dads and the hippest dad I know. All right. So happy New Year, everybody. You can interact with the show via chat on Facebook and YouTube. Some of our guests today, we're going to have Grilling with Dad. He's going to be joining us on the phone today. I should say the video. And we're going to talk about if you got that big green egg for the holidays and you want to know what should I cook on the big green egg? What's my first cook? And have any questions, please do so. You can do so again on the chat on YouTube and Facebook. You can follow along with us at cooksandcars.com. The YouTube is right up there. You just click it. You can watch it and follow along that way. You can also do through Big Green Eggs, Facebook and YouTube, and also Merlin Auto Group. So you can check those out as well and get connected that way. So please interact with us. Even if you just wanted to say hi, go ahead. We'll give you a little shout out. It's okay.
It's actually really cool. Our entire automotive portion of today's show really came from client feedback, sending us a message during the week. And we're going to talk about diminished value, which is the value hit that your car takes after you've been in an accident. There's a lot of questions around that. We get that question all the time. And it's really something that you need to know because you could potentially be leaving a lot of money on the table in a situation where you really don't deserve to. So we have some very, very, very good data for that. So any questions you have, please send them in.
Yeah, so please, I want to know about if your car was in an accident or if the car you're buying may have been in an accident. Please give us some questions. We'll have Adam on after the second half of the show. We'll be talking about that as well. But right now, we're going to move forward and bring on our next guest from BGE Team Green. Grilling with Dad joins us. Maciek, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for coming on with us, and Happy New Year to you.
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me, and Happy New Year to you both. Sounds like you both celebrated the same way as I did with my family. 2 small kids at home. So we, well, my daughter was out by like 9:30. My son did stay up till midnight, which was kind of cool.
How old's your son?
6.
Oh, wow. 6 years old up till midnight.
Yeah, he's a party. You may have to keep your eye on him.
He was fighting it. Like the last maybe hour or so, it was like one eye open, and it was just like, is it 12 yet? Is it New Year's yet? And then when it finally hit, he's like, okay, so what now? I'm like, well, this is it. Like that.
This is it.
Nothing else. Yeah, this is.
He thought something happened,
Yeah,
right.
He was expecting something else to happen. I'm like, no, now we can go to sleep.
What I really want to know is, what did y'all eat for your New Year's meal?
Oh, so we on New Year's Eve, I smoked a brisket. I don't do those too often, so it was a nice little treat. Was because we were home all day. It was one of those cooks that was pretty easy to do because it takes so long. It took about 12 hours on my egg to smoke that brisket. So it was a nice little treat, to finish off 2020 with.
So with your brisket, are you wrapping that? Because these are some of the big questions that a lot of people ask is, okay, at what point do you wrap? Do you not wrap? Or do you let it go the whole time? What is your process when doing that?
Yeah, so for the way that I do my briskets is pretty standard. So I start my cooks between 225 and 250 indirect. I'll throw in a couple wood chunks just to create some additional smoke on that brisket, and I'll cook it at that temperature, unwrapped, directly on the grate, until I'm pretty satisfied with how the outside is looking. Once that bark is nice and set, and that's usually anywhere between 160 and 170 internal, and at that point, I'm going to wrap it in butcher paper. There's kind of two schools of thoughts on wrapping brisket. You can either do butcher paper or you can do aluminum foil. And I tried both with good results, but I think I like the butcher paper better because it's porous, so it allows some of that steam and to kind of come out of the brisket to help preserve the bark. What I found when wrapping with foil is because it kind of keeps all that moisture, all that steam inside, it tends to loosen up the bark a little bit. Those are kind of just my results. So I go with the paper and I'll wrap it in paper, put it back on the big green egg, same temperature, that kind of 225 to 250 range until it's probe tender, meaning when I take my temperature probe, it'll go in without any resistance, like a hot knife going into a stick of butter. And that final temperature is going to be anywhere between 200 and 205 degrees internal. All right. And then I pull it off. Yep.
Go, keep going.
Yeah. So then I'll pull it off. I'll open up the paper, the wrap, to let more of that steam kind of evaporate and kind of come out so it doesn't continue cooking. I'll wrap it back up. And then at that point, you want to put it into a cooler, a room temperature cooler, or your oven that's turned off, and it needs a rest for at least a good hour or two, right? At that point, it's going to kind of loosen up a little bit. The juices are going to redistribute inside the brisket, and then it's going to be ready for serving. Because when you're pulling it off the grill, it's sitting at 200 degrees internal, so it's super hot, and it needs to come down. Like ideal serving temperature for brisket is between 150 and 160.
Issue with grilling with Dad. We'll give him a second to come back on, but he's right. So here's the big thing. And actually, well,
can you guys hear me? Am I back on? Oh.
all right, we're going to continue our conversation here. Sorry about the problems we're having. But Maciek, you were talking about bringing the brisket off of the egg at that point and unwrapping it and letting the steam out. Talk about that and finish up.
Yep. So I'm going to open up the paper, let all that steam come up, and now you need to rest that brisket. So you're going to wrap it back up in that paper and stick it into your oven that's turned off or a room temperature cooler, and then just let it rest for a good hour or two. It's going to bring the temperature back down. That's good for serving it, because right now that brisket's sitting at 200 degrees internal. It's too hot. It's got to rest down. It's going to loosen up a little bit. And after 2 hours, it's good to go. So then you can slice it up and then just, and then enjoy it. So total cook time. So my brisket was about 18 pounds and it took about 12 hours on the big green egg plus about a 2-hour rest. So a total cook from start to finish to serving of about 14 hours. So New Year's Eve was a perfect day to do it.
As a new big green egger, what are we called? Are we called eggers? Eggers. Yeah. So as a new egger,
Egghead.
okay, there's a lot of stuff online that I can go to your website and stuff and get some information how to cook a brisket, for example. What I lack is the knowledge or how do I prepare it? Right. I mean, and I'm talking like step by step, like what do I buy? When do I buy it? Frozen, thaw it, I mean, those are the things to me, it's like everything in life. Preparation is 90% of the battle, right? And then the other 10% is just follow the directions and execute. So I feel like a lot of my failed cooks result from poor preparation. So can you kind of walk us through from buying the brisket to getting it ready to go on the egg?
Yeah, and brisket's actually probably one of the most it's one of the most the cut that where preparation and the trimming is probably the most important. Like a good trim can make a brisket, and a bad trim can ruin a brisket, even if you cook it perfectly. So that's one of those things that takes some time, takes some practice to do. But with a brisket, so most of the time, most stores will sell a brisket flat, which is a smaller piece. They're about 5-6 pounds, and it's super lean. That's not what you want. You want to get a full packer brisket, and those are about 12 to 15 pounds. And that's a full brisket, meaning you get the flat, which is the lean part, and then you get the point, which is the fatty part. Both of those are connected in kind of one piece of meat. And I like doing those more because there's more marbling, there's more fat around it, which will help prevent it from drying out. All right, so most of these are going to be fresh, unfrozen. If it is frozen, you're going to pop it in the fridge a couple of days before so it can thaw out, similar to a turkey, right? If you're doing for Thanksgiving, take out of the packaging. And for the trimming, there's a bunch you can try to look, try to find even on YouTube, on my page, where kind of go through the process. But it's important to get the brisket kind of even and aerodynamic, because it's such a big cut and it's sitting on the big green egg for so long. You want it to be kind of even so it cooks evenly. One part doesn't overcook compared to the other. If you just cook it as is out of the packaging, half the brisket's going to be done, half of it's going to be overcooked. So that's why it's important to trim some of the fat off, even it out, kind of round the edges on it. And again, it just goes back to the brisket being on a big green egg for 12 hours. It needs, to cook evenly. Seasoning wise, there's a bunch of different ways. You can go a traditional Texas style way, which is kind of a 50-50 mix of kosher salt and black pepper. Just a nice coating on the outside, both sides, and throw it on, let it cook. You can use your favorite beef rub. You can use a barbecue rub. I tend to stay away from the more sugary rubs because the sugar will just kind of burn off and burn, because it's cooking for so long. So the more peppery rubs are better, right, for brisket.
So do you let it sit in the seasoning for a while? Like, I mean, do you take it out of the packaging, cut it up, put the season?
Yeah, usually what I'll do is I'll season it and I'll let it sit at room temperature on my countertop for about an hour or so, because it's such a big cut. It's going to kind of start to absorb and sweat out a little bit. And that's when I go fire up the big green egg and bring it up to temperature. So my flow for doing a brisket is I'll take it out of the fridge, open it up, trim it up, season it, keep it outside or keep it on my countertop, on my cutting board, and I'll go outside, fire up the big green egg, start bringing it up to temperature. And this kind of goes back to, if you're new with the big green egg, right? One of the most common questions that I get is, how do you start it? How do you manage that? How do you know it's going to stay at that 225 to 250 range for 12 hours? That's why it's important when you fire it up for a long cook like this, is to bring it up nice and slow. You don't want to get it too hot and then try to bring it back down. It's much easier and better to start it nice and slow and have it come up to your kind of target temperature, and then adjust your air vents to keep it going. And then once the temperature is set, I'll put the brisket back on, or I'll put the brisket on the egg and then just let it do its thing.
We're talking to Grilling with Dad, Rob D'Amico, Adam Merlin, Cooks and Cars. Appreciate you guys watching. Sorry for the difficulties once again, but you can interact via the chat on on YouTube or Facebook. You can do that. And if you have any questions, please chime in. We'll get those up on the screen here. But real quick, Grilling with Dad, I want to, some people have gotten their received an egg for the holiday, maybe got one for Christmas, whatever that may be. So always get the question here. I'll kick it off. Is that what's the first cook that you want to do on a big green egg? Because I know what we do and what we recommend and all that, but from a guy who's, been in that situation and had many friends who've been in that situation, what is your advice to them?
So a couple of different things you can start off with. Most people are, especially if they're new to charcoal grilling, they're a little bit maybe intimidated at first because, you got to start the fire, set the temperature, make sure your food doesn't burn. So I always kind of like to start things off with chicken. It's an inexpensive protein, very versatile, lots of different ways you can do it. Doing something simple like chicken wings, right, for example, is a really good way to break that egg in because you can get those at the store, readily available, lots of different ways of doing them. And it'll kind of get you into the groove of starting that fire, setting the temperature, maintaining it for your cook. The way that I do my wings, for example, I cook them indirect heat, about 375 for about 45 minutes to an hour, right? That's a good range, and it's a good way to manage the temperature for that 45-minute stretch, making sure that it stays kind of steady and even. And if you kind of overshoot the temperature, the wings will still be okay. If you overcook them a little bit, they'll still be really good. So it's a really forgivable kind of protein to break in your big green egg.
Yeah, also, people talk about burgers and dogs, and that's why I always say do that stuff first, because it's not so much about the food; it's more about you learning how to adjust the temperature and get where you need to be. Because if you do go over, you're not going to, so you have a little charred dog or your burger is a little more well than normal. Right. You can handle that, and it's more about you learning the temperature of cooking on charcoal or live fire, whatever that may be. And then once you get that, then you could start moving into your higher temp steaks. I would do something like that. And what do you recommend? I saw with your wings, you were doing that, what was the Parmesan?
Parmesan. I'm reading the recipe
it was like
right here.
Parmesan sauce.
Yeah, I'm sitting here doing the recipe
He's
right
ready
now.
to go home and eat already.
Well, I mean, I've tried to make chicken wings twice, and they're edible, but they're not fantastic. And, you're the second guest we've had that says that they're easy. And once again, I mean, it all goes back. I mean, I can figure out how to manage my temperature and stuff. It's just, it all goes back to preparation.
Yeah. Well, he's also the second guy that's come on and used a whole stick of butter.
Yeah, that's part of the problem too. I refuse to do that. So that's an issue I have. And the other issue I have is something you said, which I bet happens to a lot of people. I'm used to grilling on a gas grill. Yeah. So, the wait time to get my temperature up and stable is something I'm not used to, and I'm not inherently a very patient person. So I tend to, that thing's wide ass open in the beginning to get it real hot, and then I got to try to cool it down. Right. And that tends to be a real challenge.
That's the problem. Yeah. Hey, real quick. So give us your on the wings real quick.
Okay. So wings I cook. The one thing to keep in mind when cooking wings, if you cook them directly on the grate, directly over the charcoal, all that fat that's going to come out of the wings is going to cause flare-ups, and your wings are going to burn. They're going to char up, and they're just not really going to be that good. So I like cooking my wings indirect, put your plate setter in, 375 degrees to 400. That's my range. I always like to kind of give people ranges on temperature because, cooking at 375 or 380 or 385 is not going to make a big difference. And it's a little easier to manage a range opposed to a fixed, okay, I got to be exactly at this temperature. So 375 indirect heat for about 45 minutes, flipping halfway through. I cook those, so I'll season the wings with salt and pepper, throw them on, cook them. After the 45 minutes, I'll take them off and I'll toss them in the sauce. So that's when you can make whatever sauce you want to do. So I did the garlic Parmesan. You can do buffalo. You can do barbecue. I always add my sauce at the end because if you toss your wings first, they're more likely, again, to burn because they're sitting at a high temperature, for 30, 45 minutes, and it's not going to be as good. So always add your sauce at the end. And if you want at that point, you can put them back on for like 5 minutes let that sauce kind of thicken up a little bit, right? Get more sticky. If you're doing barbecue sauce, pull them off and they're ready to go.
Okay, we got a question coming in from Cheryl on Facebook. Do you ever use a drip pan under your cuts of meat to prevent flare-ups?
Yeah, so I do. I'll use it sometimes. Do for example, it's a little bit more fatty. That's going to cook for a long time, and all that fat's going to drip down on the plate setter. So I'll just put a little aluminum pan underneath, so all that stuff goes in there instead, which again helps with the flare-ups.
Yeah, and the Big Green Egg sells different sizes, so you can get those as well. I think we have them for the mediums, large, XL, and 2XLs. So you can have those little drip pans underneath there, or you could just go to the store and buy the little foil pans that they sell at the grocery store as well and get those on there as well. Let's see here. I'm looking for other questions, and we have looks like Steve here on Facebook again. When I get a new grill, I like to run it with no protein in it. And some people actually call that seasoning, if you will. We'll talk about that here in a second. I just want to learn to maintain the temps and learn the grill. So it's great advice there. And I want to talk about the seasoning part of that, because a lot of people go, oh, what's this thing when you talk about seasoning? Seasoning used to be, and one of those things when you got a new egg, when we called it seasoning, you would get it up to temp, run it a little bit. You could cook food on it, the lower temperature, the burgers, the dogs, the chicken wings, like you were mentioning, Maciek. And but it also what it used to do is help set the gasket, because the gasket was different back in the day. It's been upgraded. They don't have that problem anymore. So I would still recommend doing some of those, the burgers, dogs, sausage, chicken wings, like you mentioned, your first cooks, because it's more about the temperature at that point. You don't necessarily have to. I wouldn't go home and just decide to cook a pizza at 600 degrees. Don't do that, because it's not necessary. One, you're probably going to screw it up at your first time. Don't mess with that. But what's your advice on the seasoning part of the egg?
Yeah, so I kind of follow that same school of thought. I mean, it's really more for learning the temperature control and management at that point when you get it as a brand new egg owner and charcoal griller. Go kind of try to stay under 400, and again, just so you know how to maintain the temperature, how to increase the temp, how to back it off if you have to. Going hot on the Big Green Egg, because it can get super hot. It can be a little tricky sometimes, especially for a new owner, because you have to kind of then be careful when you open the lid, so there's no kind of big fireball shooting out at you. You got to burp it, allow that air to rush in first. So it's always better to start off easy with that at those lower to medium range temperatures for new owners.
Okay, our next question comes from I believe YouTube. How do I start without fire starters? That's a good one, because some people, they run out at a certain point and forget to go get some new ones. But what do you do in a pinch like that?
Yeah, it's a couple of different ways. So obviously fire starters are a great way to starting the Big Green Egg. You can use the electric starters. Those are nice too. You can use a little blowtorch if you have that, like a little propane torch. If you're out of anything or don't have any of that, you can just wad up a little paper towel, soak in a little oil, and put that in the charcoal and light that instead, right? That's kind of what those fire starters are basically, but they're just kind of covered in this waxy substance. So you can use paper towels, really anything to just get that initial kind of little spark and fire going, and it'll spread out over the charcoal as it goes.
Yeah, that's my trick, is I use the paper towel, put some oil on it, a little olive oil, vegetable, it doesn't matter. Then I light that, throw it in there, and it's fine. That's what we ended up doing. All right, next question here, and this is kind of down Adam's alley here. How do I cool down my egg if I get it too hot? And I'm gonna give you my advice here real quick, because this is common, because a lot of people like to set it wide open and then they realize, especially if they're new and they're getting to the temp, they get it up over 400, 500 degrees, and how do they bring it down? Well, the egg's not designed to do that because of the ceramics and holding all the heat in. And so what you have to do if you're trying to get it down to temp is you want to put in, if you do have the convector or any type of pizza stones, put those in there. That absorbs some of that heat. It'll help cool it down. You also want to make sure that if you have any extra parts, cast iron, throw that stuff in there. It'll help cool it down. But that's really the only way. You got any tips and tricks on that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's a really good way of doing it. But one thing that you don't want to do is you can definitely close up the vents, the air vents, the top and bottom vent. Don't close them all the way because that'll just put out your fire. Right. So the egg will start cooling down, but you've extinguished your fire, your charcoal's out. So close them, but leave like a 1/4 inch or a little bit open. And the top vent is probably more important than the bottom one, right? The way that I look at those air vents is the bottom vent is your gas pedal. That's like, you open that up and that thing just goes. But the top vent is your brake pedal, where if you shut the top vent almost fully, that's going to start bringing the temp down pretty quickly, because that air, the gases don't have anywhere else to go. So it'll start dialing it back down. But like Rob said, the egg isn't really made for that. So it's a little bit more tricky. So it's more important, again, to, bring it up to temperature nice and slow, rather than leaving it wide open for, 15, 20 minutes. And then you're like, oh crap, I'm 200 degrees over where I want to be.
Yes, I've been there. I've been there often. Yeah. But I drive the same way, gas pedal wide open, slam on the brake. I mean, that's just the story of my life. I'm on here, grillinwithdad.com, grillin, Grillin, no G, with dad.com on your shop, and you got all these great seasonings on here. I actually just went on and ordered a hoodie, so you should see that order coming through. I'm sure you don't see it, but that's cool. But anyway,
he is shopping over here, by the way.
I am. But I'm looking. Are any of these rubs good for wing? I mean, are any of these for wings? I kind of want like the turnkey solution for chicken wings.
Yeah. So out of all the rubs on my page, a really good one there is the Meat Church Holy Gospel, the blue bottle there that you see. That's a really tasty rub. Also, the Hardcore Carnivore Red. It's a good rub because it's a peppery rub. It's not sweet at all, which then goes well if you're doing a sauce at the end. It's not going to be too sweet. Like one thing that people should keep in mind, especially newer cooks, if you're doing something with a seasoning and then adding a sauce at the end, if you're doing sweet sauce, don't use a sweet rub because it's just going to be way too sweet. Or if you're doing a hot sauce, don't do a super hot rub because it'd just be too spicy. Try to balance out those flavors, go into a peppery rub and a sweet sauce, or the other way around. So it's a good thing to keep in mind.
Gotcha. Well, cool. Well, I look forward to getting my sweatshirt. I can use that now when I'm grilling, and maybe the food will turn out just as good. You have like a guarantee if the food doesn't get better while wearing your swag, then you buy back clothes.
Grilling abilities increase when you wear my merch.
There you go.
Green egg. That's
all right. Well,
he'll use it like a smoking jacket. He doesn't like to get smoke on his clothes, so he uses it like a smoking jacket.
That's right.
There you go.
That's right. We were actually talking, the Big Green Egg should make like a suit that you wear that for people who don't want to get, smelling like smoke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys that wants to, keep his clothes nice and clean when he's out there cooking. And, but some of those guys, man, will go out there and wear like a cologne, like it's a prize. I got to have that on me,
That's right.
Hey, real quick, got another question. From Steve, how often do you clean your Big Green Egg?
That's a good question. So a lot of it will depend on how often you use it. And really maintenance on the Big Green Egg is super easy. Main thing to do is to just kind of scoop out the ash from the bottom, because the Big Green Egg works so well when it has really good airflow. And as that charcoal, as that ash kind of builds up on the bottom, that'll prevent or restrict that airflow, which is going to cause temperature control to be harder. It's going to be uneven temp maintenance. So just as soon as you see that ash building up in the bottom or collecting, scoop it out. I really like using those Big Green Egg those aluminum or those metal fire baskets, or the charcoal baskets. It makes it easy to shake off that ash from the charcoal, clean it out, and then just scoop it out. And then just maybe once a month, once every 2 months, take a shop vac and really take out the ceramics from the inside and vacuum everything out.
All right, before we let you go, a couple things. One, you sent us some pictures of ribs and a little surf and turf. What are those recipes? Because those look delicious.
Yeah, so ribs are probably one of my favorite things to make on the Big Green Egg. I've always been a big fan of ribs, and before I got my egg, I always used to make them inside or tried different ways, and it was never really as good as I wanted them to be. The Big Green Egg is an absolute rib machine. It is super easy, very easy process. start by kind of going to the prep for the ribs. You can remove or leave the membrane on the back. There's kind of, again, two schools of thoughts, whether you should or shouldn't remove that membrane, up to you. Season, I like to go with maybe a little sweeter rub if I'm doing ribs. Big green egg, 225 to 250 degree range, similar to the brisket. And I'll leave them on like this indirect heat for about 2.5 hours. That's when all that smoke, you're going to get a lot of the flavor into the meat. After the 2.5 hours or so, take the ribs off and wrap them in aluminum foil with a little butter, a little honey, a little brown sugar. That's going to create some more liquid, some more sweetness in that foil wrap. And the foil on the ribs is actually going to keep all that moisture inside and get those ribs super tender. Right, ribs are really
issues there, but I guarantee you what he's going to say is that the foil on the rib.
You guys there?
Gotta love a live broadcast, no doubt about that. Hey, we're talking to Grilling with Dad. We were talking about the ribs, finishing up, and you were talking foil. So with the aluminum foil, you want to make sure that's really tight too. You don't want to leave any gaps or anything like that, because what'll happen in there is you'll start to steam that. So great advice there with the foil and wrapping that at the end. So continue on finishing that.
Yep. So wrap in foil, put them back on the big green egg, same temperature, the 225 to 250 range. And I like to keep them in the foil for about an hour, hour 15. Now, this will depend on how tender you want your ribs. Do you want them to fall off the bone? Do you want a little bite to them? This kind of foil wrap part will dictate that. So after the foil is up, after the hour and 15 minutes, pull them off, remove them from the foil. And this is where you can add your barbecue sauce. Put your barbecue sauce on the ribs, put them back on the egg for another maybe 15, 20 minutes, just long enough for the sauce to set, and then they're ready to go.
Okay, welcome back. Sorry about that, but let's finish up on the ribs. My apologies to you, Grilling with Dad, but go ahead and finish up on the ribs.
Yep, no worries. So put them back in the foil, back on the egg, cook for about an hour, 15 minutes, pull them off. This is where you can add your barbecue sauce right at the very end. So glaze your ribs with the barbecue sauce, back on the egg for about 15 minutes, just long enough for the sauce to set, and your ribs are ready to go. So total cook time, you're looking at about 4 hours, 4.5 hours for a really tasty ribs from the Big Green Egg.
All right, and then the surf and turf, you sent a picture of that. That is spectacular. That looks beautiful.
Yeah, surf and turf is a really good thing to do because I like doing that with the expander accessory. So people always ask me what are kind of the must-have accessories with the Big Green Egg, especially for new owners. The expander is what allows for dual zone cooking, meaning you can have half the grill directly over charcoal and the other half is indirect heat. This is where that surf and turf comes in because you can start your steaks the reverse sear method, meaning you're going to put them on the indirect side, bring it up to temperature nice and slow. Once your steaks are at about a 110, 115 internal, put them on the direct side of the grill to start searing them off. And that's when you put your lobster tails on the indirect side, because those take all of maybe 5 minutes or so, 7 minutes to cook. While your steaks are searing, your lobster tails are on the indirect side, cooking, coming up to temperature. Top with a little butter at the very end, and you have lobster tails and grilled steaks coming off the egg at the very same time for a surf and turf dinner.
All right, and before we head out,
it sounds so easy.
You know what I mean? And look at the picture.
That's the thing. Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's a lot of it is people think it's much harder than it actually is. I mean, it's really easy with the egg, especially if if you have a couple of good accessories like that expander, a good meat thermometer, which is another must-have. You can crank out some amazing food on the Big Green Egg. Like, I'm not a professional chef. I don't have any cooking experience besides cooking in my backyard, making this for my friends and family. And if I can do it, believe me, anybody can do it.
Hey, before we head out, cars. Obviously, we're talking cooks and cars. You got a favorite car out there? Do you own a nice car? Do you want a nice car? Dream car? What is it?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely like cars. If I didn't have a cooking page, I definitely would have a car page on Instagram. I was super into cars, growing up since I had my license. Always was into imports, so really more of the Japanese cars, doing a lot of modifications, or at the time what I thought were cool modifications, but nothing crazy now with the kids, just kind of family, grocery getters that we have. No minivans though. My wife refuses to get a minivan, which is kind of cool. But dream cars, my son, so my 6-year-old, more into cars, more into these supercars, watching stuff on YouTube. So a dream car is definitely a Lamborghini. That's one of his dream cars, always been one of my dream cars. I'm not sure if it'll happen, but maybe one day, we'll see, right?
It's really funny when your kids,
into them, which is kind of cool, seeing that from my son.
Sure. It's funny when you're a kid and you do modifications to cars and you think they're cool, right? And you used to, like you said, at the time, you thought some of that stuff was cool. Today you look back and you're like, what was I thinking? I mean, it's just, it's really funny to see.
Yeah.
I mean, it cracks me up. But look, I mean, it's just like anything. It's just like the egg too, right? Like my kids are into the egg. My kids are into the cars. So it just helps you. I don't know if it helps us justify the expense of them, or if it just, it's like a bonding thing, and it's something you have in common, which is fun, which I think is so cool.
Yeah. And Grilling with Dad, I know that's part of the game, right? Grilling with Dad. And then you have your kids out there from time to time helping you out, which is really cool, man. We do appreciate your time today. And how do any of the fans want to follow along with you, interact with you? How do they do that?
So my main platform is on Instagram. It's grillin_with_dad. You can follow me there, shoot me messages. I always respond. If you have any questions on any cooks, any recipes, or Big Green Egg questions, shoot me a message on Instagram. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. You can also check out my site, grillinwithdad.com. You can contact me from there as well. Also on Facebook and all the other social media platforms with the same handle, Grillin with Dad. And always happy to assist, answer questions. and help people out.
All right, man. Thank you for your time today. Do appreciate it. And thanks for joining us today here on Cooks and Cars.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
All right. Take care, man.
Right.
Great advice there from Grilling with Dad. Great dude. I know him very well, and he's awesome. We appreciate him coming on and answered some great questions.
Well, I got that Holy Gospel rub coming with my sweatshirt, so I went ahead and bought it. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of anything the Meat Church does. Some of the stuff is really good.
Yeah. So we'll see. I'm calling him if it's not good. So
also want to give props to our buddy Chase Elliott, the 2020 champion, brought this by the show, and he'll be on the show here shortly as well. So we appreciate him dropping that by. We'll keep it here on the set. Maybe we'll pop it open and drink it too. But save
keep
that for
having technical difficulty. We'll have to.
I will be drinking. Yes, exactly.
No joke.
Hey, on a sadder note, though, on New Year's Eve, Mario Andretti had announced on Twitter that his twin brother, Aldo, had passed away at the age of 80. So our thoughts and prayers are with the family. And, just sad. The guy, what Mario means to racing, his brother, when he said he passed, it was, half of him, died with him. So very sad situation, and our hearts and thoughts go out to the family. We're going to take a break, come back. We're going to talk Diminished Value, and hope you enjoy watching, and you can interact with us on Facebook and YouTube. And we'll take a break, come back. It's Cooks and Cars. There's a place where fire and flavor are celebrated, where grilling traditions and new techniques are perfected. Here in Big Green Egg Country, you can grill it, roast it, smoke it, or bake it. It's the most versatile grill you'll ever own. Simple to light, easy to use, comes with a free lifetime warranty. Have it delivered to your door by a certified dealer in your community and start enjoying the ultimate cooking experience. Shop online for home delivery at biggreenegg.com. That's biggreenegg.com.
Adam Merlin, president of Merlin Auto Group, and over the past 12 years, we've been successful at building our business with the undying focus of taking the pain points out of what normally is a miserable process, which is buying an automobile. And it was on this mindset that about 2 years ago, we launched our service department. Because let's face it, the only thing that's potentially negative about owning these exotics or ultra luxury cars is the fact that you have to service them, is the fact that they stand the chance of possibly breaking and you don't know what's wrong. It's the fear of the unknown that we as the consumer sometimes are really nervous about before we go and buy that Ferrari, before we go and buy that Aston Martin. And that's the reason we started Merlin Auto Group Service Department. We went out and got factory trained, certified technicians for Ferrari, Maserati, Bentley, Aston Martin, Rolls-Royce, and Porsche to make sure that you had somebody that you can rely on to help you manage your automotive investment and make sure that the right things were getting fixed, they were getting fixed the right way by people who knew how to fix them and were willing to take the time, answer your questions, and make sure that you were satisfied and you understood what was going on. If you're looking for a shop where you can get an appointment easily, where we'll answer the phone, where you can talk to the technician, where we genuinely care about your problem and truly want to help you solve it and be your partner in your automotive ownership experience, you need to give us a chance here at Merlin Auto Group.
All right, welcome back to Cooks and Cars. I'm Rob D'Amico alongside Adam Merlin, and we're going to talk about a couple different things, one of them being diminished value. So, Adam, start talking about that because I need to figure out what that means. It's a couple things. So it's when your car is in an accident, the value of it goes down. So in the position of buying a car or selling a car or going to a dealership and you find out it has an accident under, what does this mean and what do you have to do?
Yeah, so the whole concept of diminished value is very important. Basically, in general, what it means is, after when you buy a car, it's going to go down in value. That's expected. It's diminished value applies to an unexpected event that causes a decline in the inherent value of some personal property. As it relates to cars, this is usually resulting from damage from an accident, and your car that's never had any previous repair work, your car that's never been in an accident before, it has a good pedigree. After an accident, the car has been repaired, it's been repainted, it has a history of an accident, and that inherently reduces the value of a car. And laws vary from state to state across the country. In Georgia, insurance companies are obligated by law to pay diminished value. And a lot of people don't know that. The other thing that you don't know is that the amount of money that the insurance company tells you that they're willing to offer you for diminished value is also negotiable. And that's really where, that's what kind of spurred this whole discussion. We had a client who asked us the question that, he was in an accident in his 458 Ferrari. Somebody at a very slow speed backed into him. It damaged the front light, the bumper, and the hood. And so the car was still drivable. Airbags didn't deploy. But he knew that now his Ferrari that had no previous repairs, no previous paint work, no previous damage, now had a history of that taking place. And the insurance company's offer of diminished value, which they don't offer until he asked, right? I mean, it isn't like it comes over as part of your claim. Sometimes they do that, and what they'll do, they'll just send you a check hoping you'll just cash it. But in this case, they offered him less than $1,000 in diminished value. And he called me, he said, Adam, what can I do? And, that is really where it gets tricky, because it's very subjective as to the impact of that value. But we can all agree that your 458 Ferrari, which is, at the time it was probably a $200,000 automobile, that, a 5,000 mile 458 Ferrari being perfect and having no damage history, now having a hood replaced, a headlight replaced, and a new bumper,
Why? Here's my thing with this is that let's say a tree falls on your house, right?
Right.
You got to get new siding, you got to get new shingles, new roof. They put it back together. It's now better and their value actually goes up. How does that not work the same way? It's like the opposite.
So you sound like the insurance companies, right? In this case, they said the car's actually better now than it was before because you have a new hood, you have a new bumper, you have a new headlight. Right. So instead of the stuff being 3 years old, now the stuff is brand new. Well, the thing is, and we've talked about this, especially, look, diminished value is very, like I said, it's very subjective, and it also depends on the car, right? With Ferraris, with exotic cars, there's a huge element of originality that takes into account when you're valuing the car. Your Honda Accord that's 5 years old, that gets in an accident, you replace the hood, you replace the bumper, you replace the lights. Is there really a diminished value? The car's worth 15 grand. The car's not worth $5,000 now. Does it really make that big of a difference? Depending on the severity of the damage, it really doesn't. In those cases, when it makes a big difference is if there was any kind of structural damage, which could then compromise the safety or stability of the automobile. But when you're dealing with exotics and collectibles and stuff like that, we always talk about the originality of the car, which is so important. And that's really what is the most impactful thing to the value. It's then the lack of originality, and it's the vehicle history report that then says the vehicle's been in an accident, because there's a huge percentage of the population that simply won't buy a car that's been in an accident no matter what. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. You know, it's amazing. And we talked about this last week. I think it was last week or the week before when we were talking about the Carfax reports. You know, you could be sitting at a traffic light, somebody's foot slips off the brake and they tap your bumper because you're over in an abundance of caution. You call the police, you file a police report. Your car now has a Carfax report. There's people out there who would never buy your car and it didn't sustain any damage.
Yeah.
I mean, it just simply has a police report that says somebody touched it at 2 miles an hour.
Whatever. Yeah.
Right. So
You may not have had to change a thing on the car.
zero. But now that it has that, there's fewer people that'll buy it. The ones that will buy it will require a discount. Right. And so it's the loss of value. Right. You know, my car was worth 200,000. Now it has damage history. Now the best I'll get is 180,000. You're entitled to that $20,000 loss. The hard part is proving it. Right.
Yeah.
And that's where the insurance companies who have lawyers on staff and, you know, they fight this stuff all day long. You know, they're very quick to tell you there is no diminished value. Your car's actually better than it was. And again, you know, if you follow what the insurance company tells you, you're going to end up really taking a lot less than you should. So it's important you call somebody, you get an expert in diminished value or, you know, or simply, you know, somebody like us that knows values and interacts with these things all day long to help give you a gauge of what you should be expecting.
Yeah, I'm not one of those guys. So let's say something shows up and it's got an accident on it. I'm looking to buy it. I'm not one of those guys that shy away. What I will do is go look at the car, pop the hood, the trunk, door jams, make sure paint matches, the everything lines up. Because that's when you run into problems. If stuff doesn't line up or you got paint that doesn't match, it just kind of looks goofy. And not that it's anything bad. You also look for the ripples and, you know, if there's body damage and they try to cover some things up, you can also check to see. And it makes it harder nowadays because a lot of cars aren't all metal anymore.
That's correct.
Yeah. So it makes it a little more harder to do. But any advice there if these cars that aren't all metal?
Look, I mean, the most important thing is to try to, I mean, look, if you're not an expert in assessing the physical condition of an automobile and it's been in an accident and you have some questions, the most important thing to do is to have an expert assess it for you because cosmetic damage is very easy to fix. If the car was repaired by a body shop that couldn't match paint colors, that doesn't mean that the accident was so bad that they couldn't match the paint color. It simply means that the person was probably directed by their insurance company to take the car to a body shop that really wasn't qualified to work on the car, right? I mean, I say it all the time. The exterior physical condition of your car is it's important, but it's less important than the interior physical condition of the car because if you destroy the interior physical condition of your car, it's almost impossible to redo the entire interior.
Yeah.
It's not very hard to paint an entire car. Right. So when you talk about, you know, doors not lining up and different gaps and stuff like that, you need to figure out why. And if it's because the car was fixed by a shop that doesn't have the precision tools to do it, especially when you're talking about specialty and exotic cars, then, you know, you can get that stuff fixed and it's not a big deal. If it's because the frame of the car has been shifted and it's, you know, that the car is no longer, plumb, for lack of better words, then that's a totally different ballgame. And that's a car that is the diminished value number on that car is going to be staggering. Right. You know, I've actually been involved in a diminished value claim with a client where it wasn't the amount of damage that was done to their car that made it where it was a total loss. It actually was the diminished value claim that was going to result that took the entire claim beyond a point where it made sense to fix the car and they needed to total the car out, which is actually interesting if you think about it, because it was actually less expensive for the insurance company to just pay the total loss value of the car than to fix the car and then be subject to the diminished value claim. And that was because the car had some structural damage that might have never been fixed properly, which really would have just destroyed the value of that automobile.
All right, we do have some questions, but it looks like you may have answered this question. I'm looking at buying a Maserati that shows it was in an accident according to the Carfax. if you want to go back and listen to the Carfax conversation we had last week's show, episode number 4 had a lot about Carfax in there. But is it a huge mistake to even consider buying that car, that Maserati that has been in an accident?
So it's definitely not a huge mistake, but again, and this goes back to diminished value and why there's diminished value, right? Like no person in their right mind is going to pay the same amount of money for a car that's been in an accident as one that hasn't been in an accident, right? It's no different than when you go and you're looking to buy a refrigerator and there's like a scratch and dent sale or something, it has an imperfection. You go to Restoration Hardware and buy a dining room table. I mean, I did this. I bought a dining room table that had a scratch on it, and literally instead of paying however many crazy thousands of dollars they wanted for it,
right.
It was $200. I mean, it was $200, and I was like, I could care less about the scratch, right? So, there are a lot of times where it's a real value to do that. But again, it's so important to know, look, it's impossible to know the extent of the damage every time. It is not impossible to figure out what panels have been painted, if something's been replaced. But most importantly, you need to make sure that the structural rigidity of the car is intact. I'm willing to try anything once. Cars that have had major structural repairs, I've never tried before, at least not on purpose. And that's something that I would shy away from.
All right, next question is, can I still get diminished value even if the damage on my car was not severe?
Yeah, so you can. So insurance companies, that's a great question. Insurance companies may not, may tell you differently. But again, now that the car has a history of an accident, right, that inherently makes that car less valuable in the marketplace because there's fewer buyers. And like we just said, somebody who's willing to buy a car with a history of an accident report is going to want some kind of value or price concession, which ultimately takes your car from being worth X to being worth X minus whatever that concession is to make somebody buy it. Now, the challenge is that's a very subjective value. Right. So how do you prove to the insurance company, and the onus is on you to prove to the insurance company what that value really is? Now, if you just happen to have your car appraised earlier in the day before you had a car accident, right, and then after the car's been in a car accident, you can call back that dealership and say, hey, I want to do my deal, but my car was in an accident. And they say, oh, well, I'm sorry. Now, instead of your car being worth 50 grand, it's now worth 40 grand. You've realized $10,000 in diminished value. You can prove that in a court of law, and you will win that $10,000. Now, the likelihood of that happening, it happens. Trust me. I mean, it's happened to us before. Really? Where, we've had a deal. Guy drove home that night, got in an accident, wanted to come back the next day and trade the car. And look, I mean, your car's just not worth the same. Yep. And so, but he's entitled to that money. So. We could sit here and talk for 3.5 hours about how to do it and how to get appraisals and stuff like that. But it really is something that you need to be aware of. It's something that you need to understand that you are entitled to. And in the state of Georgia, it is a law that the insurance company has to pay you. Now, they're going to tell you there's a formula that they use.
And I see that right now. We have another question coming in. I'm trying to get diminished value from the insurance company, and they told me based on the formula they use, I only get a very small amount of money. Is there anything I can do? And I actually looked this up, and I'll let you answer this question because I don't know the answer, but they do use a formula. It's like 17C or something they call it. And what is this formula they're talking about? Yeah,
so they do have a formula that they use that allegedly takes into account all the factors, and it's something that their actuaries, I mean, it's an insurance company, right? So they can predict the future. So it's a mathematical formula based on averages that they've determined that this is the actual real value loss, right? And again, the onus, the burden of proof to increase this claim is on you. So can you do something about it? Absolutely. I mean, you could take it down to litigation if you want to, but you are going to have to find a way to prove that the actual diminished value is greater than the formula that they're using. And oftentimes this requires enlisting an expert appraiser to appraise your car, or this or this requires enlisting an attorney who may end up actually filing a lawsuit against the insurance company. And what the insurance company really banks on is that you're not going to go to those lengths and you're just going to take whatever it is that they offer you and go away. But if you have an attorney that'll file that claim, and the insurance company knows this too. I mean, you're going to end up paying the attorney, you're going to end up paying the appraiser. And then by the time you do all that, right, you could get 3 times the money from the insurance company, but you're going to end up netting less by the time you pay for the appraisal, by the time you pay for the attorney. So you may be better off just taking the first offer. So, but it's challenging because you have to prove it. It's impossible to prove a number that's subjective, which is why they came up with some kind of formula based on averages. But, in my world, in our world of the exotics and the Ferraris, there are no averages, right? Yeah. Every car is very unique. Every car is very special. If you have a car that's completely original and now it's not anymore, I mean, that has major impact on the value.
And does that change? You talked about it, I think, in episode number 3, when a Ferrari, you have 2 millionaires bidding on a Ferrari. Now that value starts to go up. Does that change that formula change a little bit because of that value going up?
Yeah, without a doubt, and look, I mean, that car, I mean, we have cars in our private collection at Merlin Auto Group that we know are going to be 7-figure cars one day. If one of those cars, if I'm, we drive them from time to time to exercise them and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. If God forbid I take that car out on the road and somebody rear ends me, right now, all of a sudden that car's not going to be worth what we believe it's going to be worth one day. Now, there's no claim that I can make. Look, I mean, this car's $250,000 today. It's going to be worth $1 million in 5 years, and get the insurance company to pay me the $700,000. Yeah. That you're never going to get, yeah. Right? The other thing that insurance companies tend to argue on older cars, a lot of older cars are fully restored. A lot of older cars do have non-original paint, yet they're still collectible. So you can argue, or you can try to make a point that the diminished value is not that significant because we talked about, like an 1986 Ferrari Testarossa. When that car came from Italy, the paintwork was terrible, right? Over the course of 40 years, 30 years, whatever it is, 36, 4 years, right? The reds faded and, the scratch, sure. So somebody's already repainted the car. So the car's already not original, right? Yet it's still going up in value. So, if you have a light ding somewhere, and you have to have some body repair, an insurance company is going to argue that the diminished value is not nearly as great as you're going to argue. And where we're going to argue that from is it's the impact to the history of the car. It's one thing if you take a car that's just worn by age and you restore it back to better than its original condition. It's another thing if the work that's been done to the car is resulting from an accident, simply because a car that's been in an accident is worth less than a car that has not been in an accident. And that's not an opinion. That's a fact.
Yeah,
that's a fact.
All right. Great stuff, man. I think that covers everything. I'm looking to make sure that there weren't any other questions here, and it looks like we're all good. Some great advice, man. That's one of those things where you get caught up in that formula. And as a guy who doesn't know anything about it, trying to get with the insurance company to get some money and figure out, well, I think it's worth this. And they'll say, no, it's worth this. And they're pretty much going to be in the ballpark, right?
Well, look, it's the same problem. It really, it's funny. It applies to everything, right? Grilling with Dad will come on and talk about, his brisket, and he'll talk about, what he does, his exit 250, he puts it on, he does this, he does that, he does that, he does that. Right. And it's almost like he assumes that everybody knows how to get the brisket to the point where it's ready to get on. Right. Yeah. He's an expert. I'm sitting here thinking, like, I don't even know how to begin to navigate this process. Right. Like, he needs to walk me through step by step. It's the same thing with insurance companies. Insurance companies bank on the fact that you have no idea what you're entitled to. Yeah. You have no idea what the rules are. And they're just going to tell you this is the formula, this is what you get. And if you don't know, sometimes you don't even know what you don't know, yeah, right? And you can Google. Google diminished value. There's a ton of solicitations. They want you to hire them for this, for that. It really can get very, very tricky. But again, the problem is that it's your burden to prove your loss. Now, we agree there's a loss, and the insurance company will agree there's a loss in most cases. It's your burden to prove the magnitude of that loss. And again, that goes back to preparation, which we talked about, and understanding, and trying to figure out a way to prove those market comps and the loss. And look, I mean, it's important you call an expert, right? I mean, that's when you don't.
That's key.
It is, because you're talking about enough money where it's worth it. And you can get somebody will talk to you for free and try to give you some advice, and then you'll figure out how much it's going to cost you. And, in a lot of instances, it's worth it depending on the value of your car. If you have a car that's worth under $20,000, getting a big diminished value claim it's
not happening.
Yeah. And I'm not saying $20,000 isn't a lot of money, but it's just,
absolutely.
I mean, there's not a lot of $20,000 cars out there. They move fast. There's high demand for them. And a car being in an accident is less impactful than a car that's $250,000.
Yeah.
So.
All right, man. Great stuff. As always, do appreciate it. Everybody who's interacted with us today, thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Thank you to Grillin' with Dad, Chase Elliott, for this cool little bottle here. We'll have to celebrate. And again, we apologize for all the technical difficulties that we've had here. So, we promise we'll get this fixed, and we'll continue on. We'll be back here next weekend, same time, 10 a.m. Eastern time on Saturday. And we'll see you guys next week. For Adam Merlin, I'm Rob D'Amico. Thank you for watching Cooks and Cars.